Alright, chat. I wanted to watch this video called I Owe Kathleen Kennedy an Apology because I'm super into Star Wars and basically everything having to do with Star Wars. And she is the president and she's been shit on for the last well, basically since 2017. She's been getting shit from everybody for not making great movies. Apparently, I've heard that the movies that were greenlit were not actually her ideas, basically. So we're just gonna watch this and give our opinion on it.
She knows better than I do. So, I mean, that's the best part about this, is it's not somebody who I have to explain anything to. You know, I mean, I've worked with Kathy for so many years. I mean, it is, well,
It's
at
been
least
a long
like
time.
35 years. And, you know, in close producing together, just working together, and as friends, and, you know, it's a great relationship. He actually has all the qualities that are necessary to run a company like this.
What advice do you have for Kathy?
Good luck.
Good luck.
Yep.
Good luck.
I remember this.
Good luck.
You know, something's always confused me about
She got a good word in from the man himself, bro. Like the guy who created this whole universe. And it's sad to see where it went after that moment.
Kathleen Kennedy Star Wars thing. There's always just been this one lingering question the whole time for me, and it's why did George pick her? Because George picked her, you know what I mean? Like she was handpicked by George. You actually like know the lore of Kathleen Kennedy. She's like, you know, the story's weird because it's like she's this super competent, really awesome producer lady that George Lucas handpicks.
Yeah.
And then it's like at the top of her height of her power, so to speak, she goes dark side. A lot of us just thought, well, that's what's going on with Kathleen Kennedy, and that's why, you know, so many of us went so hard on her. You probably already know what this is about, but in case the clickbait got you and you're not quite sure the context, there's some crazy information out there now about Kathleen Kennedy, Star Wars, Bob Iger. And this all really began with Adam Driver doing an interview with the AP where he discusses a Star Wars movie that he had been trying to get off the ground for multiple years called The Hunt for Ben Solo. This is a film that was going to be directed by Steven Soderbergh, who, by the way, actually commented on this. It's very rare that people involved in this kind of a story would actually comment on it. Soderbergh literally said something like, I very much enjoyed making that movie in my head, and I'm just sorry the fans will never get to see it. And that's like, it's wild. But what it resulted in was the uncovering of a lot of truths, or at least potential truths, about what's actually been going on with Star Wars. Because Adam Driver very specifically says Kathleen Kennedy, Carrie Beck, and Dave Filoni were all on board with this film, The Hunt for Ben Solo, and Bob Iger and Alan Bergman very specifically were the ones that killed it. Now, for the very first time, we're getting a...
So that's very interesting because this whole time, people were thinking that Kathleen Kennedy was handpicking these directors that didn't really like Star Wars or didn't really know anything about the franchise and only wanted to make what they wanted to make and like force Star Wars to be something that it isn't and that it never was supposed to be. But it turns out it wasn't actually even the president of Lucasfilm herself, Kathleen Kennedy. It was actually the president of Disney that was making most of, if not all the decisions on where they wanted the franchise to go. And it seemed like for a long time they also started trying to make Star Wars projects, movies and TV shows, and comic books and like actual books the way that they were making Marvel properties, which is they would make it like a big connected universe because that's how it is in the comics. But with Star Wars, that's not really how it should work. Like, yeah, there's an overall story, but not everything needs to be like highly connected to each other. Like the TV shows, you don't need the TV shows to explain what Darth Vader was doing on a Tuesday night. Like, there's no. That's how Marvel works. That shouldn't be how Star Wars works. It's never been that way. It never should have become that way.
Very specific calling out of Bob Iger and Alan Bergman and Disney itself in the relationship between Lucasfilm and Disney, right? So Adam Driver's being very specific here. He's like, yo, we were all on board. It's Bob Iger and Alan Bergman that said no. It's a wild thing. But anyway, let me explain to you what happened next. Basically, guys, when this happened, I, like many of you out there, got really upset. We're like, wow, this is crazy. Like, that would have at least been bold. Kylo Ren's kind of cool. Like, the sequels kind of suck, but like Kylo Ren's cool. And so I put out a statement. I said, like, hey, man, if you have any other stuff out there, like, if anybody out there knows anything about Bob Iger and maybe other times that he has done something similar to this, hit me up. Well, what...
Why did Kylo Ren do the fucking Michael Jackson moonwalk pose
Bob
when he was gonna stab that guy?
Iger and maybe other times that he has done something similar to this,
Bro did the moonwalk to stab him.
hit me up. Well, what ended up happening was one of my best sources ever, like a person that I trust a lot, a person that has given me a lot of very accurate information about Star Wars stuff, even very recently, where I had that big video about Ahsoka season 2, and you know, the mall show had that way before anybody else, and so like, this person's very reliable. Well, this person actually sent me a laundry list of things that was going on with Bob Iger, and this person was like very specifically saying like, hey man, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, here's all the stuff that happened. So let me now take you through a list of stuff that this very, very good source told me was stuff that Kathleen Kennedy wanted, that Bob Iger killed. And then at the end of the video,
Okay,
we're going to have a conversation because, look, man, maybe this is your first time hearing some of this stuff. Maybe you've heard this through other sources and whatnot. But I've been sitting with this for a couple of days. I have some thoughts. I've processed it a little bit, so we'll talk about that at the end of the video. So first up, let's talk about the Clone Wars. So around the time that Disney buys Lucasfilm, the Clone Wars is sort of given an early exit. Okay, now this is pretty widely known. They kill that. They keep Clone Wars, the show, canon to the Disney stuff, but they stop it, okay? And we've seen previs on many different things that were going on in that last season of Clone Wars, including stuff with like this gigantic Kyber crystal, some flashbacks, even to Revan himself, really wild stuff that was going to be going on in that last...
Which is kind of crazy, because like half of the stuff that they did before the Clone Wars eventually got renewed for a final season, they kind of just continued some of those ideas into Star Wars Rebels, which was like the Clone Wars offshoot made by the same creator, but they kind of just continued some of those ideas into that show, even though it was technically made under Disney. But in my opinion, I think Rebels was pretty lazy, because like Clone Wars, the closer they got to the show being canceled, the better the show got. And so once Rebels started, they got that Disney money. They can do whatever they want. So they just got complacent and were like, yeah, we'll just make a decent show, you know. People will be happy because we're spending so much money because we got Disney money now. We don't got Cartoon Network money anymore. Now we got Disney money. And it's like, we still want a good product, though, you know?
Season of Clone Wars. Well, as it turns out, it was Bob Iger that killed that. And what I was told by the source was that basically Bob Iger didn't want to have anything to do with the prequels, really. That's where this was rooted in. Which, by the way, if you go back and read the book, Bob Iger's actual book, where he's talking about George Lucas's treatments and what they wanted to do, there's this weird line where Iger says something like, George was mad, but he didn't understand the pressure we were under to deliver something that felt quintessentially Star Wars to the fans. And if you read between the lines there, what Iger's really saying is that George didn't always make stuff for the fans, at least from his perspective. And that is mainly focused on the prequels, right? It's so interesting now, because we'll come back to this way later in the video, but I just want to set this up for you because it actually does make a lot of sense that at the time of the acquisition itself, Bob Iger is literally saying, hey, we actually are not going to do this crazy ass George Lucas stuff. We want to just do Star Wars. Like, what made Star Wars Star Wars? When you still had it, George, when you made that crazy thing, we want to just copy pasta that into oblivion, right? That's the corpo speak. That's the corpo way of doing things. But what's important to know now is that what my source is telling me is that Kathy was fighting for Dave's show to continue. She wanted to just continue Clone Wars. Bob Iger said no because he didn't want to glorify George Lucas Star Wars. He didn't want to glorify the prequel era stuff. Okay, so that's going to become really important. We're going to come back to that. Hold that in your
Which
thinking
I
cap.
think is super fucking dumb. Like, you're that up your own ass because you bought the property and you're like, well, now it's ours. So now we don't have to pay homage to anything that the actual creator of this fucking universe did in the past. So we can't make any references to the Clone Wars because they didn't. For the first 10 years that Disney owned Star Wars, they didn't do shit with the Clone Wars era, like the prequel era. They only referenced the original trilogy. And it's like, you're that scared of movies that were still pretty good movies. Like, I don't even get it, because in the prequel era, there's 3 movies. One of those movies is my favorite Star Wars movie ever. And they just decided, for 10 whole years, let's not even talk about the fact that that era even exists at all. Really? The 2 best Star Wars movies, in my opinion, are Revenge of the Sith and Empire Strikes Back. And they just didn't want to acknowledge that Revenge of the Sith even existed for 10 whole years.
Connected to this
Insane.
is a report from my source that Kathy is the one that fought really hard to bring the Clone Wars back. Again, Bob Iger did not want to do this. Bob Iger was very willing to just let Clone Wars have its sort of makeshift, shitty ending where Dave had to cut everything short and just do all that crazy stuff, right? Bob was like, no, we're cool with that. I don't want to do it anymore. Kathy is the one that fights tooth and nail to get that greenlit, and eventually they get it greenlit, but here's what's really interesting. Apparently, Filoni wanted to cover the Son of Dathomir story from the Dark Horse comic books, the stuff that had Talzin, Grievous, I believe it has Dooku, and it's Maul. Very interesting little story that's technically considered canon, but it's in a Dark Horse comic book. Dave was going to adapt that in the newest season of Clone Wars when it came back, and it was going to be 16 episodes.
That's so cool.
Bob Iger said no. Bob Iger said,
I wonder if that's what they're going to do with the Darth Maul show now that we heard is going to be created. Yeah. I just can't believe they cut it short and then Disney was like, yeah, we're not even going to talk about it. Why? I'm still baffled by this decision.
you have 12 episodes, and that's why we got the Clone Wars the way that it was. Next up, let's talk about the Mando and Grogu movie. From what I understand and what my source is telling me, this is a Bob Iger idea. And that kind of makes sense. I mean, Star Wars Celebration, about 3 to 4 months before we found out about the Mando and Grogu movie, rolled out 3 different films and a plan, an actual cohesive plan on what they wanted to do with Star Wars movies. This included the Charmin Obed-Chinoy Rey movie. This included the Dave Filoni Heir to the Empire movie. We didn't know exactly what it was, but pretty sure it was going to be Heir to the Empire. And then the James Mangold Star Wars movie, which was going to tell a story like 30,000 years ago, the origin of the Force and the Jedi, right?
Okay.
So that was their plan. That's what they announced, Lucasfilm. That's what they announced at Star Wars Celebration. They had been planning it, cooking it, and they announced it. 3 to 4
Why
months
is Kathleen Kennedy wearing Jordan 1s? I just noticed that. I just think it's funny. Nothing else to say. I just think it's funny looking.
later, Disney, in a weird-ass press release, announces that a Mandalorian and Grogu movie is now happening, and it'll actually be the next Star Wars movie you see in theaters. Well, doesn't that seem disjointed and dysfunctional? That's because it is. That's because that movie was Bob Iger's idea. According to my source, all of the scripts for season 4 of The Mandalorian and Grogu were done. Jon Favreau wanted to just do his 4th season, but Bob Iger mandates and basically made it happen that now we're going to get this Mando and Grogu movie. Also worth
Which is crazy because, like, Yeah, Jon Favreau wanted to make a third or a fourth season, like he said. But Bob Iger was like, we need to make Lucasfilm money, so we have to put it in theaters. And so they were forced to make it into a movie. And by extension, by making it a movie, you're making the ending of this series, which started out as a TV show on Disney Plus for 3 seasons. It's now a movie, which means if it's a movie, it has to be shorter. And so you're cutting content just because you wanted to put it in the movie theater to make some money. That's inherently anti-fan behavior.
The 4th season of Mandalorian was going to redeem Boba Fett. They knew they messed that up, and they were going to redeem Boba Fett, make him badass again. Hopefully that can still happen. Maybe it'll be in the film a little bit, although I doubt it. And then if they do end up doing that 4th season, maybe they can still do that with the Boba Fett character. But again, something cool, something they were all down with. Even Kathy was down, and Iger killed it. Now, next up, we got to talk about Luke and Rey, because this is where it's going to start to get really, really weird. And a lot of you are probably not going to believe this. I am still struggling with wrapping my head around this, but I will just say that this comes from an incredibly reliable source. And I will also say that the more I sit with this, the more that it does actually make sense and track with things that we have heard. Basically, Kathleen Kennedy reportedly wanted Luke and Rey together to be the primary focus of the new trilogy, and that was something that was really important to her. But this idea was
I feel like that's why they set it up at the end of Force Awakens for her to find Luke. And then it was like this grand moment where she finally finds Luke, and now by the next movie her training can begin. But then Luke's character was character assassinated and turned into a fucking homeless ass bum that was just mad at life. And it's like, really, bro? One of, if either the second most or most important and influential and most recognizable characters in all of Star Wars, and you made him a homeless bum that's mad at life? Really? Ridiculous.
Basically for 2 reasons. Number one, because Iger really, again, did not want to glorify all of the George Lucas stuff. It really does seem like Iger wanted to establish new Disney Star Wars stuff and kind of be like, thanks, George, but we can take it from here and we can make it for the fans again and get the fans excited, unlike your prequels, right? That's like the undertones that I'm picking up in the information that I'm getting.
Side note, if you saw me delete any message in chat, it's because that person is 100% a scammer and I just banned them from my channel.
So therefore, Rian Johnson has this crazy ass idea.
You're allowed
to
to type in chat, of course.
And Bob Iger is the voice in that room that's saying, let's go with that. I actually like that. Maybe Kathleen Kennedy gets on board at some point too, and then, champions Ryan, because obviously that's something that we saw. But I'm just saying that, like, from the early days of what the trilogy was going to be conceived, when everybody was like giving their ideas, my understanding and the understanding of my source is that Kathy wanted Luke to be a really important part of all of this, which, I mean, kind of makes sense. Look at what they do in the first film. You know what I mean? It's all building towards Luke. And then Ryan goes this different, crazy way.
Exactly.
And it's just like, I think we need to reinvestigate what actually happened around that time period. It's just not as simple as like Kathy was like, fuck Luke Skywalker, kill him. You know what I mean? That's not what happened. In fact, my source told me that Iger himself was pushing for the deaths of legacy characters, including all of the Skywalkers, because number one...
Why is every old famous person's go-to pose when they're taking a picture is to either point at themselves or point at somebody else? Like, why is that always the go-to pose?
For the deaths of legacy characters, including all
Respect
of the Skywalkers.
to Mark Hamill, but it's kind of funny.
It would be a really like shocking, crazy shock value thing, but also because it's the way to say goodbye to all of George's stuff and welcome in all the new Disney stuff. And again, like, the more you really think about this, how is it possible that the lady that George Lucas handpicks, and we have video of Kathy saying that the most important thing in the world is to honor like George's stuff. We have the video. People have brought it up because people like to dog on Kathy for like betraying George after saying that. But isn't the Occam's razor explanation that she did want to do that? Like, isn't it actually more believable that the person George Lucas handpicked did want?
I just thought about this. You think she hates Bob Iger for letting her take the heat for all of this shit for the last like 15 years? Because I feel like if you're the boss of a company and you're boss of the company that owns your company is like doing all this shit, making you look bad and not telling people, wouldn't you start to hate them as well? Like,
to continue the legacy of him, that instead the corporate controlling entity might be incentivized to go away from the original creator's stuff to solidify their own version as the new thing.
Also, I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, this guy was like, what's it called? Not when it's
This isn't a music video, Hassan.
Yo, Queen Panda, thank you for the follow. When it's the opposite, commercial real estate. He was like a commercial real estate agent and turned into the CEO and like the boss of Disney somehow. Like, what is your credibility for running a media company after being like basically a landlord?
For Star Wars, are you guys starting to like kind of
Like, why did he get this job originally?
Stuff? Like, because this is like,
because it's for the most part, it's only turned out bad since he's been the boss.
Oh shit. Here's a couple other things that'll blow your mind. I have heard that there was a Bane series. There was going to be a streaming service or a Disney Plus series that was going to involve Darth Bane. Bob Iger said it was too weird, too fringe. No. Kathleen Kennedy wanted to do Old Republic. She wanted to do an Old Republic trilogy. Now, this is kind of already on the record because she was, of course, cooking.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so she wanted to do that. Other people wanted to do Darth Bane, which are like, these are two deep cut lore references into things that George Lucas created. So obviously Bob Iger wouldn't want to do that. You know?
So with Dan and Dave, the Game of Thrones people, but
because he hates everything that George made, and that's why he bought it and decided to make it into something else.
No, which is so weird because it means Bob Iger said no to like Game of Thrones Star Wars, basically, because that's what like Old Republic could have been. But now he's about to say yes to Game of Thrones Marvel and Secret Wars. Man, it's just so mixed up. The thing, it's all mixed up. And here's the one that's like really the crux of it all. It's the big kahuna. It's the one that is really it's like shaking my foundations of belief here and everything that I've been thinking over the past like 8 years. Okay, so according to my source, Kathleen Kennedy really wanted to use George Lucas's treatments. Now,
oh man, imagine if they did. How much better it would have been. Don't get me wrong, I liked The Force Awakens when it came out. After watching it a few more times after the movie came out, it's not as good. It's still the best out of the 3 mainline movies that Disney made. Bar none. Like, by far. Because The Last Jedi was bad. Everybody knows that. And then The Rise of Skywalker, they tried to correct it, which by extension made that one even worse than The Last Jedi. It was just course correction, the trilogy. It was horrible.
Very famous. This is in Bob Iger's novel, which again, think about why he would even write about it. He would write about it to control the narrative, right? I mean, this is like, it again, you really take a look at what happened before, and to me, I'm just looking at things a lot differently, okay? But anyway, point is this. It's very well documented. Bob Iger talks about it in his book that George Lucas had treatments for his sequels. And Disney buys Star Wars, but they also buy the treatments. And Iger himself says in his own book that he knows George thought of that as a tacit agreement, which like tacit agreement or like a tacit approval is like when you're in a room with like your really good friend or like your wife and they say something and maybe it's like controversial. If you don't like correct them or whatever, it feels like you approve of it. That's what tacit approval is, right? So anyway,
that makes sense.
Iger himself says that he knows George felt as though there was tacit approval to buy that they were going to make George's stuff. And remember, George gets furious when he realizes that they weren't going to use his stuff.
He like borderline crashes out. And I just think it's funny when Mark Hamill talks about what they did to Luke Skywalker, his character from the 70s or late 70s, early 80s. And he goes, I don't even see this character as Luke Skywalker. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. And it's like, so they made this character become so awful that the person who acted as the character decades ago hates what you did with it. That's a sign that you made a bad movie. And that you did something bad with a character that was already established.
Okay? And what my source is literally telling me is that Kathy wanted to use George's stuff. And in fact, there was so much fighting over this that from that moment on, there's a soured relationship between Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger. From that moment on, Iger took a kind of, honestly, he basically said, I'm going to now step in all your shit, is kind of the impression that I got. Basically, after that moment where he just asserts himself, it sort of forces the thing where they're like, nope, we're not going to do George's stuff. There was an incredible amount of tension there between Kathy and Bob. And I want you to think about this. Think about the dysfunction of Lucasfilm for the past 5 to 8 years.
Yeah.
Think about how much of that gets laid at Kathleen Kennedy's feet, and I'm responsible for a lot of this. I played the clips at the beginning of the video. Dude, I was really fucking mean to this lady, dude. And I really did say some horrible shit, but I also, like, more than that, genuinely believed that she ruined Star Wars. And a big part of, like, why
that's the thing. Like, yeah, we were all duped. We were all duped into thinking she was the problem. Meanwhile, she had agreed with us the whole time and just didn't tell us because she didn't want to lose her job, because it was actually the big boss the whole time that was fucking it up for everybody.
So bad was that George picked her. So it always felt like this incredible betrayal. Like the lady that George picked, handpicked to take care of his baby, just sold him out to the devil in Iger. And to be honest with you, there is sort of an extension of this conversation where we can say, well, you know what? She kind of goes along with it. Even if she didn't want it, she goes along with it. So she's still culpable in a lot of ways. And that's fair. That is fair. But I think it's also important to try to correct the record here. And I think it's also important to like realize, hey, guys, Kathy might not have been the Sith Lord. It might have been Iger the whole time, which, by the way, so Star Wars. The Phantom Menace hides in plain sight. Right? The Phantom Menace hides in plain sight. Palpatine hid right in front of us. Supreme, you know what I mean? And it's like, fuck, we never looked at the Supreme.
No, literally. That's so ironic because, yeah, Palpatine was in front of us the whole time and everyone blamed Dooku for the evil things that were happening in the galaxy. Just like in the original trilogy, Palpatine was behind everything, and everyone was blaming Darth Vader for the evil things that were happening. It's always the bigger boss.
Chancellor.
There's always a bigger fish, to quote Star Wars directly.
And some of you guys are probably like really mad at me because you're like, dude, we did look at the Supreme Chancellor. We've been trying to say this to you for years, et cetera, et cetera. And I get it. Best I can do is just admit that I was probably wrong and try to correct the record now, because this is crazy. And I believe my source. I truly believe that we were misled about what was going on with Star Wars. it's not as though Kathy was perfect, and I think she did plenty of stuff that messed it up, and she put her foot in her mouth, a lot of stuff publicly. But at the same time, you look at this, if this was really what happened, she deserves a lot of credit, man. She showed an incredible amount of grace, despite the walls falling down, and despite corporate considerations, and this fucking ex-weatherman, wannabe president
Weatherman, yeah.
like,
he wasn't
really hanging her out to dry. Ultimately,
yeah, this guy was a fucking weatherman. The guy who's the CEO of Disney. What are we doing? Why is that the guy that we chose? Or that was chosen for us?
is what it is, if this is all true. So look, we'll talk more about this in the future. I'm looking forward to talking to my friend Star Wars Theory about this. I think we'll have a really good conversation on Nerd Theory.
I do want to see that, yeah.
Break this all down, but
because I know Star Wars Theory absolutely can't stand, probably even more than me, what's going on with Star Wars and the route that it's been going down for the last 10 years.
For now, I felt it was important to get out here and put this video out, put this information out there for you on the main channel. I'm still processing this. And I guess the last thing I'll say about this, as far as processing it, is I certainly feel a lot of shame. You know what I mean? Legitimately, I feel a lot of shame. There was a time, guys, where there were other folks out there that were incredibly hard on Kathleen Kennedy. And there was a time where I used to defend her a lot, right? And I used to say no, it can't be. It's not that simple. I don't think she has this agenda, this, that, second, and the third. And for the longest time, I tried to be reasonable while also saying that I felt she needed to step down. And the whole idea there was it started off as a base level sports analogy thinking where she's the coach of the team. They're having a losing season. In that situation, the coach steps down. That's what happens. And it's for the good of the organization. And I remember I got put into a video with a lot of fandom menace people. Maybe some of you guys remember this. And was just sort of it was all framed as I was this big, toxic, horrible dude that was just hating on Kathleen Kennedy. And I really wasn't then. Again, because I was trying to be reasonable. The irony at the time was many people were like, Josh showed up in a fandom menace.
I think the rest of this video is him talking about how wrong he was and how bad he feels that he was wrong. I will say this. I've been very open with my opinion on Star Wars and the president of Lucasfilm and how bad it's been recently. But as it turns out, we were all wrong. And it really wasn't her fault this whole time. Not completely, at least. A majority of the blame can fall on Disney because, Disney owns Star Wars now. They do what they want with it, unfortunately. They don't like to listen to the people that will buy and watch and consume their products. I just wish that they could, get their head out of their ass and you could have just made a Mandalorian and Grogu season 4. But they decided they wanted money, so they are going to make it into a movie. Which, I understand. I've heard that Lucasfilm is bankrupt at this point, almost. So they're kind of desperate at this point, so I get it to a certain extent. But, do what's best for the people that financially support you. If you are reliant on our money being paid to you, you should probably do the thing that we want you to do. That's just common sense in my opinion. But anyways, let me know what you think in the comments, and like and subscribe. I'll see y'all later.